Hello, everybody, and welcome back to How's That, the Cricket Podcast with me, Lily, and Josh.
Hello, everyone.
So we are joined with another guest today, who is a former Australian and New South Wales cricket player. Do you want to? You can introduce, Josh.
So it was very awesome and very insightful to chat to this former player, Ann Mitchell. Played in the 70s and 80s that we don't know much about. So it was just really awesome to chat to her and feel what it was like.
Yeah, she gave us some really good, like you said, some insights on the things that you don't necessarily hear in media anymore. It's not something that's heard about. So she gave us such a good insight, and it was really good to hear how times have changed. So she was super involved in the Cricket Australia women's department and the New South Wales women's department as well. So she really was involved within the development of women's cricket. So we chatted to her all about that. So without further ado, we hope you enjoy our interview with Ann Mitchell.
We know they're our arch enemy. They treat us that way and we treat them that way, and we're very much out to prove who is top. And we beat them when they were here in 84-85, their last series out here.
So thank you for talking to us. I guess we'll just get started.
Okay.
So right from the very beginning, can you talk us through your cricket story and how you first started playing cricket?
Well, like a lot of people in my era, I started playing in the backyard with my brother, who's just 17 months younger than me, and we had a big, long backyard, fairly narrow, but we used to just put the dustbin up the end and I'd practice bowling to him and so on. I ended up really being a fast bowler and virtually taught myself. I didn't have any coaching until a lot later. In fact, I didn't even know women played cricket. I was out with a family picnic one time with an uncle and auntie of ours from down the New South Wales countryside. And when they saw me playing, and my uncle said to me, you know that there's women's cricket going, you should join a club. And I said, well, I haven't heard anything about it or any clubs. Anyway, I sort of dismissed it. But when I went to university and started a course there, I was looking to play some sport, as I was always interested in different sports, and I was just playing some netball training and looked down, and there was a woman in a white lab coat with a group of about half a dozen people gathered around her. It turned out to be Molly Dive, who was a former Australian captain and has a stand named after her at North Sydney Oval. Anyway, I went down and I said, how do you join? And they said, can you play this Saturday? And I said, I suppose so. And they said, just wear some white shorts and a white shirt and you'll be right, you know. So I went along that Saturday, and it turned out to be graduates versus undergraduates, an annual game they had. And I learned everything by experience. Like I was no ball straight off because I knew nothing about the lines and where I was supposed to put my feet and so on. So I'd say from that point on, I learned something every game. And people like Molly Dive, they used to umpire sometimes for us and give us little tips as we were going. So that was the start. And just with the university club, I then got a bit involved in administration because they used to grab the freshers and plonk them into some sort of role to get them involved. And that sort of took off. I was secretary of the club, and then I went to New South Wales as a delegate and saw what they were planning, the New South Wales Women's Cricket Association, and from there it took off. I think I was in the junior side, which for the state, which is the under 21s it was then. I was only about 16, but I got into that in about 1963, I think, 62 or 63. And more or less that was the start of my career, and I just used to go to trials and progress through as the seasons went on.
Yeah, well, that's incredible. That is
incredible.
So how did your Australia story start as well? Can you
Well, yes, okay. So as I went on, I was one of those, I don't know, I've always been the same. If I see things can be improved, I really push to get that done. And as I became more involved with New South Wales women's cricket, I ended up as president of New South Wales women's cricket in about 1977, I'll say. I just can't remember the date exactly. So then I went to meetings of the Australian Women's Cricket Council, found out what they were dealing with, which was mainly sort of national championships. They only had one, what you used to do then. They couldn't afford to travel every weekend to play each other. So you'd have a big carnival, as they called it, or tournament in January usually. And everyone would get together in one host city. So it might be Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, whatever. And once you sort of got into that and involved in that, you saw what was happening. Then we had hardly any international sort of experience. There was, when I first got involved, the girls had just come back from a 1963 tour of England. And Muriel Picton, who was vice captain of the Australian team, it was president of New South Wales at the time, I think, and they were just pleased that they, because of apartheid, a tour of South Africa to Australia was cancelled. And they were going, hooray, you know, because we haven't got any money to host them. And I sort of, as this newcomer, thought, oh my goodness gracious me, we need people to be coming. We've got to get some money. Anyway, and that set me off. So that's in the mid-60s. And then when I got to Australian level, we kept pushing for more international games and so on. It was at that time just as people, they tried to make up a little itinerary. There was no set schedules really of who played tests and so on against whom, but they tried to make some little agreements between each other and say, oh yes, well, we'll have you in a year's time or something like that, and make agreements between the two countries rather than anyone setting up a schedule. But once I became involved in all those areas, administration, meanwhile still playing, I might say, in the 70s, I was chosen for Australia in 1975, a tour to New Zealand. I didn't get to play a lot. I was an excellent 12th man. And but I got to see what was involved, and I got that feeling for the international game. And I thought, right, no matter what, the next couple of years I could see that I was on the fringe of being selected, but I had people like Riley Thompson and Sharon Tredrea who were top fast bowlers ahead of me, and I figured I might have to think of another way to get involved. And hence I became the manager of the Australian team in 1977 when we played a test against India in Perth. And that was the start, and I went on for the next decade in that role.
Wow, that's incredible.
So what was it like to become the team manager of that team? What was that experience like?
Well, it's an incredible experience. Lorna Thomas, who'd been the manager before me, and she'd taken them on all the key tours and so on, she just gave me a little notebook and pen when I was appointed and said, here, write all your notes down in here so you don't lose anything, you know. And I learned from that point. I mean, at that stage, the manager was the only support staff with the team. No coach, no physio, no scorers, no anybody. And you had to organise all their training runs, their practices, their help keep the time of batters in the nets and things like that. And you also had to learn how to billet people. We only went into hotels during test time because the nations couldn't afford to host you all the time and pay their accommodation. So you'd be billeted out in people's homes. And so you'd be forever making up lists and moving people around. This one doesn't like cats, so I have to be careful where I put her, etc. So it was a very challenging role, including in those days you used to be the one that got up and spoke on behalf of the team at any occasion and so on. So I did a lot of that, looking after the players if they were ill or injured. That sort of kept you up at night sometimes, or rushing to the hospitals. I've done a bit of that. But it was a very challenging role, but it was great to be there and be part of those teams. As I said, that feeling for the international scene. I made lots of friends all over the world, and I helped the team get there, and we had a winning decade. The 80s was, I think we were beaten once in a one day by New Zealand in that whole time.
Wow.
Wow. And on that, Anne, that is interesting, because now these days everyone talks about the coach and the captain running the teams, and and there is still managers around, and I've gone to games and I've seen them running around almost like headless chooks sometimes, and no one takes notice of them now, but they're still just such a huge role in the team. They do as much as anyone, really.
Yes. It's really the organisation and making sure the team gets to the place they have to be, and that the dressing rooms are right and clean and left tidy at the end, and all those little things that go on behind the scene. But in those days, you did have to do a lot more. These days, I counted up, I forget when it was, maybe when we were doing the tests against England recently, but I counted up their support team in England. I'd got up to about 15 people. And I thought, what do all these people do? And the Australians had just a few less. And so they almost make up another team. You've almost got one-on-one for the players.
Yeah.
But they've got team psychologists, team doctors, team scorers and statisticians and everything else, So it's a very different world.
Mm.
Yeah, it's so interesting to see how times have changed, really. So I feel like the pathways obviously developed so much. So
yes,
when you first, or over the time of you overseeing all this cricket, how far has the development of women's cricket pathways, how far has that come, and what things have improved over time?
Well, it's come a huge way. Of course, when I started, I only remember it being in a couple of private girls' schools. It was not a statewide school thing at all, having cricket on the curriculum or as an opportunity for them. And taking New South Wales, where I grew up, there were girls all around the countryside. The schools and everything, and so often there were girls in the country that were spotted with talent and so on. I can remember a person like Lynn Larson from Lismore. Lynn was very good at a lot of sports, but cricket was something she loved. But she used to come down for selection trials and games in Sydney, and I'd meet her. She'd be on the bus all night. I'd pick her up and take her to the ground, wherever it was. And then she would just join straight in and be expected to play the game or compete against the others to get into the team. And that's just an example, of what it was like. I've lost track of the question here going on to that. But the pathways since then you could only get into like an under-21 side and then the open senior side. After a while, they realised that half the girls in the senior side were under 21 anyway. So I got them to experiment with under 19s and so on, and we did hold a tournament in Sydney to test it out. But it became an under 18 thing, and then afterwards they developed the under 15s and so on. And we've even got country sides now that compete against country sides from interstate. So the whole pathway is being developed from the under 15s, and all that I think came about because of the Kanga cricket and so on in schools and the other modified games that were introduced. The girls started to play in their PE lessons and things like that. And eventually, as they were coming through, it pushed the scene into something quite different. And a lot of youngsters were coming on. And that's what it's like today. I remember after the World Cup in 2020, there was quite a boom in girls attending the coaching clinics that were offered by each state association. And I spoke to the CEO of New South Wales at the time, and he said, you know, there are hundreds of girls coming through now.
Yeah, I feel like that World Cup final, like you said, I was there and Josh was there, and so were so many other people. And I feel like for people who are, I guess, like younger girls who are younger than me, that could be such an inspiring moment.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel like with the WBBL also having some games on TV and being accessible, and for people, you know, young girls being able to go down and watch these games, I feel like that's also played a huge role in the development of women's cricket in Australia. You know, these girls being so accessible.
Well, the states originally played 2-day games against each other when I told you I had that tournament in January. Then they started on 1-days and eventually flying in for a weekend. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they play games in a state and then come back home and so on, because all of them were still holding down jobs and things at the time. They were playing T20. They used to build in a T20 in that weekend visit to other states. But it wasn't until Channel 10 got a hold of the Big Bash and showed it. And I had all sorts of people talking to me. They knew I was involved in the women's cricket scene and said, wow, you know, there's a good game, or this person's good, that person's good, etc. And I found a whole lot of blokes in particular were watching and enjoying the cricket. And that exposure was really the thing. And that's what I'd said way back. I said, we've got to get publicity to get the crowds and get the money ourselves when we were struggling so much for money and trying to find sponsors and so on. But once those things progressed to that point of the Big Bash, things were changing.
Yeah, and it's great to see, like you said, you know, it's these girls now can have professional contracts, you know, so
yes.
So now that they can have, you know, these contracts and they don't have to have jobs on the side, was that a thing, you know, when you were playing, or was that people had regular jobs?
There was we were nowhere near that. Yeah. I remember even when some players, I remember Lindsay Reeler was one who opened the batting for Australia, or was in the top order anyway, and she got a bat sponsorship. Well, this led the International Women's Cricket Council to discussing, are they allowed to do that? You know, it was a sort of a time when you were strictly amateur in a lot of the sports, and the idea of someone getting their bats paid for and so on was a bit hard for them to take. Anyway, that has sort of progressed to this point now where some of the top players have managers, and they look after themselves and their career now because they've got that paid contract in place. I think it's been a great boon, and I remember Alex Blackwell saying to me that she'd been juggling part-time work and playing at the top level, and she said once we didn't have to do that, we could train every day. We could go in there, do some fitness work in the gym. You know, they weren't having to fit all these things in before work or after work and getting home late and all that sort of thing. She said it was so much easier.
Yeah, and that's even coming from Alex Blackwell. I think that's you know, she wasn't playing too long ago, so that clearly shows that
she was just on the brink. She's got her book out now called Fair Game.
Yeah,
I've read that. It's rather critical of some things that happened around the Australian team, but it's very forthright, and that's what Alex is like. But she says she was just on that cusp when they started to get played. First, she still had to keep a part-time job sort of thing, but then eventually they could move into doing it full-time.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Now she's a mum. Now she's a mum. That's fantastic.
Yeah, now she's a mum.
Yeah.
It's her daughter born the other day, yes.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have another champion cricketer.
Oh,
you know.
I hope so. That'd be great.
Yeah. Of course, Alex and her sister Kate, who was also a very good player, and Alex says in the book she loved it when she played for Australia and Kate was there too. And Kate's career might have been chopped off a little bit early, I think, by selectors because she was a very elegant bat, very good bat. And I think she could have gone a bit further, Kate, actually. But Alex made the most of her time and she had some great innings.
I definitely agree with you there. And yeah, Kate definitely should have had a longer career. I think they almost said, oh, we need to choose between Alex and Kate.
Yeah, it was silly.
So what do you think is the next step to just further the development in women's cricket from this current moment? What's the next step?
I think we do have to get test series going more often.
Yes, definitely.
Because all we did in our day, as I said, we played 2-day games in our weekend grade matches and so on. And then we played tests. The first one-dayers, the 50 over, I think we played 60 in the first World Cup of 73, because women tend to get through their overs quicker. They don't take the giant steps of the men and the fast bowlers and so much time to muck around and change in bowls and so on. So we played 60 overs. Then we came to T20 in a decade or so after that. I think that series against England did grab people's attention just recently, what we call the Test series. And with India agreeing to play a test when they came out as well, that's the first time for them. And I think they'd be willing to play more. Now, we've got to get on board some of the other countries, though, South Africa, West Indies, New Zealand. They say that they can't because of costs and things like this. But this is where the national governing bodies have to consider, all right, it's so much to put on a test, but you can do it for the women as well. There's all sorts of ways of managing it, you know. And whether you've got a women's test playing in Sydney at the same time as a men's test playing in Melbourne and you can cover both, I don't know. But there are ways. There's a lot of thinking to go on, I suspect. And I think those series, such as we played against England and India, should become common so that we get the other teams in gradually and then maybe more test matches will come about. And I think that's what the women have got to aim for. There's more women in, well, very few of them though, in the umpiring and scoring and things now, but there still needs to be more of those. There are more girls in the game or women in the game. And the commentators, of course, you've seen how that's come about. With Channel 10 taking on a few and then it expanding, Channel 7 and Foxtel. And at times there you had Mel Jones, Isa Guhu and Alex Blackwell, the three of them commentating for Foxtel. This is a career for them, which is fantastic in the game that they love. So there'll be more of that, I hope. And I think they've got to continue with the development of the young ones and help at the grassroots level, at the local, they call them premier grades or something rather now, premier cricket in each association, because I know when the girls are taken out to represent New South Wales or Victoria or South Australia, they find it hard back in the grade level to fill in for them. There is not enough depth as yet, and I think attention's got to be paid to that.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's really good, yeah, what you said about the commentators. Yeah, I guess there is a career after cricket for the ladies now. Like I could definitely see a few players now that could finish up and then go into commentating and really add that extra value of insight to what the women's game is.
And I think in coaching too, we've got Shelley Nitschke, who's assistant coach in the Australian team. There's got to be more like her coming through, using those insights they've got from playing themselves and going on into that area, coaching our sixers and thunders and strikers and so on, and not relying at the moment on the men, because there's not enough, again, depth in women coaches and their experience. And yet, I have to say, people like Jodie Fields have been over in America coaching the American team. Their game at the moment is taken worldwide. You can get a job anywhere.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you mentioned about, obviously, the next step would be to play more tests. So they're currently at 4 days. So what do you make of having to be?
I'm not one that finds it necessary to change at the moment. It's interesting. I've just been researching, when did we start these 4-day tests and so on? So from the beginning, they were 3 days. Then New Zealand and Australia both thought they should be longer. So in 1972, we played a 4-day test against New Zealand, and in 1975, when I was in the team. But meanwhile, all the games against England were still being played as 3-day games. And actually, Rachel Hayhoe-Flint, the captain, said, "Oh, no, we don't need 4-day games. We can win in 3. You've just got to declare." Well, she was relying on these captains to declare and give people a sporting chance. But of course, when it comes to the fear of losing or getting a draw, most people accepted, we'll get a draw, we won't declare and risk it. So that attitude has changed, I think, today. And I think the 4-day test is fine. Tests, even with the men, they'll always be interrupted by rain. You'll always get some tests somewhere interrupted by rain. And that's just the luck of the draw, because we're an outside sport. Then they started talking about, putting them indoors. Well, it will change, the wind and the heat and the dryness of the pitch, all those things will be changed if that happens. So I see at the moment that just playing 4-day tests for women, we should be able to get a result further down the track, because the women are scoring better, higher scores perhaps on the whole than they did in the past, although you can go back and find some good records in the past. The consideration of 5-day tests, I think, should be just shelved for the moment. Let's just get the 4-day test going with everyone playing.
I did hear that too, thinking about putting them indoors, and I'm like, nah, test cricket at Marvel Stadium. No, I don't think that would be good.
That's what I was picturing, I mean, when someone was talking about it, I read articles and see what the suggestions are. But see, if it's 4-day tests and you've got some of these nations coming in that aren't quite so strong, you could wipe them out, in a few days. So it's no point going to 5-day tests at this point. Even in 1987, when I took the team to England, this was commemorating 50 years since the first Australian women's team had gone over. And we beat England in the first test in 3 days. So we had this it was 2 days in those days, sorry. Of course, England only wanted to play the 3 days. But we beat them and had a whole day to spare. That sent a shudder up their ranks, I'll tell you that. And it didn't happen again. But imagine, new countries coming in, Sri Lanka, Ireland, the Netherlands, the West Indies, I don't know. They haven't had any experience, I don't think, in Test cricket. So it's probably wise at the moment just to keep pursuing 4-day tests and getting them more regular.
Yeah, it was and I feel like the test that obviously went on, the women's one recently in Canberra, I feel like even though that was just a 4-day one, it's still it was so incredible. And even though it ended in a draw, it was just
absolutely,
it was just so brilliant to watch. And I feel like even though there wasn't a result, it still felt like a win just in women's cricket. It was
100%.
Yes, true. Because both sides were vying for it, were going for the win at different stages until right at the end, England knew, all right, the writing seems to be on the wall here, we better go easy. But no, that's the sort of thing, the drama of that gets people in and excited about the game, And it's a great testimony to the women on both sides, that game. That was great.
Yeah. So you received an OAM.
Yes.
for services to women's cricket. So can you talk us through what was receiving this like?
Well, that was really significant to me. At the time, like for some time, I'd been going to the New South Wales Cricket Association just as an observer. I was the first woman sort of in that room where they were holding their monthly meetings and so on. And I used to get the annual report and see all these guys had OAMs, AMs, etc., etc. And when I was notified that I was going to get one, I thought, and I hesitated because it was at a time when the Beatles and people like that were rejecting these honours. And I'm a bit of a Labor girl at heart. We're all working in this together, you know, why do I need to be singled out? But I thought then, thinking about those men in the annual report, I thought we need to have some women there with these OAMs and things at the back of their name. And the girls were in the middle of playing. It could have been that 5-day test, I think. And I went in to get the honour that morning with my mother, and we came back and they had a big sign up on the notice board, congratulations. And the girls bought me a cake. This is the current team at the time, Lynn Larson, Belinda Robertson, a whole lot of them. And they were so proud. And I thought, well, that's the importance of it. They see that you can be recognised, that our sport does count. It's important, you know, so I accepted that, but it was a great honour.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, like you said, with all like the men getting OAMs and you're like, oh yeah, it's time for the women to be recognised. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. That's been great to hear.
Nominations just weren't put in for the women, and this is something we talked about as sportswomen you know, we tend to be a bit reluctant to push other women forward or something. There's something about women's nature. I don't know what it is, but it's getting better since then. We've had a few more go through. But at that time, you did give your life to it. Like it was basically that. I had my work and then I had cricket that I'd come home to at night. Even during the day, there'd be things. It was non-stop, weekends, etc. And you do this for 40 years or something or other, and perhaps it does deserve some recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you mentioned that you were team manager of this Australian team. Now, you were involved in some World Cups, I believe.
Well, I've got an interesting story about the first World Cup, 1973. Because my friend Patsy May was selected in the side and so on, it was at a time I was looking to travel anyway. So I went as a spectator to the first World Cup. But in the couple of weeks beforehand, I got a message from the Australian Women's Cricket Council saying that I was being appointed to the international 11 team because they'd formed this extra team because of the apartheid situation and South Africa, which had withdrawn. So suddenly it seemed as though I was going to be playing. But a few days later, I get a telegram saying, sorry, but you're not in the team. They wanted a wicketkeeper. So I was that close to competing in the first World Cup.
Oh, no.
And I was getting all excited about it. But anyway, I followed Australia around, rented a car there in England, went all over the place, staying at bed and breakfast and so on, and following it. It was a very exciting time. And on the final game, in those days it wasn't a final because it was all decided on points from the rounds. And we'd unfortunately lost a game because of rain, that while England had an advantage up north and they didn't get the rain, and they ended up, I think, on top. But anyway, come the time we played each other at Birmingham, and somebody, I don't know how, but I ended up as in with a commentary team identifying the Australian players because none of them, you know, we weren't often televised. They didn't know any of the players. And so I sat up there the whole game and watched from there. England won and Princess Anne presented the trophy, and I was supposed to actually be down there because I was a delegate from Australia as well for the international meeting, but I never got down there in time to meet her. So it was an interesting one, that first World Cup. But I've tried to be at every one I can. There were two I've missed. I think one in India and one, the first one after I retired as president of Women's Cricket Australia. In 1998, I retired. So it was the one after that in New Zealand. And we actually lost that New Zealand one. And there's a woman by the name of Mary Brito, who was chairman of the New Zealand Women's Cricket Council when I was president of Women's Cricket Australia, who she's been to, I think, nearly every one too. She might have missed one, if that. And we keep bumping into each other at these World Cups, comparing notes and so on. But each World Cup has been really, really interesting. As I say, that first one, I think we played 60 overs. I'm not sure when that was reduced to 50. But probably we were just complying with what the men were doing and what was the standard at the time. And we went to 50 overs. But they've all been exciting. The most exciting one for us was one that was not hugely publicised and so on. And that was the second one in 1978 in India when I was managing the team. And this one was interesting because India at the time were notorious at not being good with communication, and they do things at last minute. So some teams withdrew. And I think in the end, all I can remember is England, Australia, New Zealand, and India taking part. But anyway, in trying conditions and everything at time, we got through and we beat England in the final for the first time. And that's right, it was like beating the mother country at last. And it'd been a long, it's the same as the rivalry with the men, you know, us and England sort of thing. And since that time, that was the next decade when I said I managed, and we hardly lost it. Well, we didn't lose anything. And we won the next World Cup and we won the next one. So there were 3 in a row there, finishing with the one in Australia in 1988. Which was our bicentennial year, and the Bicentennial Council assisted us with some money. That helped us to host that particular event. But they're all very exciting, and we've tried since, us oldies, to go and support them where we can. But of course, we're all poor because we all paid everything out in the early days playing the game. We have to save for a couple of years to get there, sort of thing. But we've been to the last couple. The one in England was great, where, again, we didn't in 2017 get to the final, though it was England and India. But it was a full house at Lord's, and it was a great atmosphere and experience. And India nearly won it, but they let themselves down, as they often do. They seem to not hold it to the end. So these days, we've been going, and we were booked to go to New Zealand. A group of us from Melbourne were going across and getting a minivan, and we'd already booked some accommodation and so on. But with all the doubt over COVID and airlines and everything last year, we just came to the point we had to cancel. We said, we can't do it. And it was really disappointing, you know. So that's one of the things at the moment we are really disappointed about, because we like being there as the cheer squad. The team knows we come along and support them, you know. So our little compromise, this little group from Melbourne is going to get together in a house down by the Great Ocean Road, and for the semis and final, we will all be in together, cheering Australia on, watching it on Foxtel.
That's fantastic.
We're not giving up entirely, but whether they'll hear our cheering, I don't know.
Oh, 100% they will. That is, and a lot of people, just give up and go, oh, no, it's too hard, like with COVID and everything. And just getting together and just watching it at a house or at your home, it's just that's more than what you can do.
Yeah, someone came up with a great idea. I think it was Marg Jennings, another former Australian captain. And she said, why don't we do this? You know, rent a house down there. And we said, oh, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
And so, it's so great because, you would love to be there. And, like Lily said, we were very fortunate enough to be there at the T20 final. There's nothing like it. It's just absolutely incredible. And, they'll hear your cheers for sure.
Yeah. Let's hope Australia's there in the final. That's what we've got to hope for.
Yes, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, so obviously you said that they were going through, Australia were winning, in that 80s period. And it's feeling a lot like what the team's like now, just winning and on a really good winning streak at the moment. So I think coming off the T20 World Cup and the Ashes, I feel like that's going to give Australia a good confidence boost, I think, going into this this series.
Yeah, I think noticing, watching them during this last series against England here, I was expecting great improvement from England because Lisa Kite had been taken on as coach again. She'd done it once before with the England squad, and she really brings the best out of those girls, and there was flashes of it, the start of the test when they attacked the bowling, there was signs of it right through. And yet in the end, we still seem to have the power and the depth to come out on top of them. So that would put us as favourites. India, if it can get its act together, can really do something. I know they've got a lot of talented players. And New Zealand itself is performing well at the moment. They've beaten England in 3 one-dayers so far, is it? I think. And even though, again, India seemed as though it might break through, New Zealand were able to get on top of them with good performances. Susie Bates, Amy Satterthwaite, they've got centuries. Their bowlers are doing well, Jess Kerr, etc. Sophie Devine as captain is superb. So New Zealand on home soil, that was the one I missed back in 98 or somewhere or other. It was after 98, sorry, but I'm not sure of the year. They were on home soil and they did it. And they will have a bit of confidence having beaten India in these few games. So they could be good. But again, the confidence and depth of Australia should get us through, I think.
Yeah, definitely, you're right. We've got so much depth. We're just a team of all-rounders almost. We got Annabelle Sutherland.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tali McGrath, who is just an absolute gun. So, do you have a prediction, or for?
Very, very hard. The teams were all released today, and I was having a look. And South Africa, I think, without Dana van Niekerk, she, of course, is injured, isn't she? I think. And,
yes, she.
She's a really good leader. And looking at the semi-final in that 2020 World Cup T20, they had such a close game with Australia at the Sydney Cricket Ground amongst the rain and all that sort of thing. But their fighters, they've still got some very good players, Marizanne Kapp and Shabnir Ismail are good bowlers, pace bowlers. Seuss is, I think she's the captain, but she's a strong batter. I mean, they could do something. New Zealand, I think, are shaping up well. They've seemed to got their act together at the right time. Some of the others, and this is what I fear, they haven't had time together as squads like West Indies and so on, and even India. They seem to have shuffled around a bit with their selections. And I just don't know, they've just not played enough together. These games against New Zealand would have helped them to meld as a team. But I don't know if it's enough. They don't seem to have pulled it off. But all I can say is it's going to be very, very close. I have no idea. It could be the same four that were in the T20, which in the semis, England, South Africa, Australia and India. Could be those four. I'll go for Australia.
Yes.
I think it's something that hasn't been mentioned yet is England are reigning champs. So
Here we go.
That was
2016.
4 years ago. Past history.
We talked to Kate Cross on Wednesday, and she pretty much told us like what they're taking from the Ashes series, and it's pretty much just their batting. They've just got to work on their batting. But they've still got Shrubsole, who took 6 for in the final, and you know, Heather Knight, Danny Wyatt, Nat Siver, Catherine Brunt, all of them are still in the team. So they've got a good mix of experience and new players. They're not looking like they're in the best of form at the moment because of their previous games, but the whole motivation of being the reigning champs could take them over the line, I feel like.
Yes. I just think, though, that confidence Australia finished up with them, and England, who tried everything in that Test series, couldn't break through. I think that won't help them when they come up to face Australia, no matter what happens. And coming back to you, Josh, I think I was rethinking then that New Zealand could end up ahead of South Africa in this situation, as I say, without their usual captain. And India, if India don't pull themselves together and work together a bit better, and think more about their batting, like they've got batting strength, but they tend to throw it away sometimes. So it's going to be interesting.
It will be.
Yeah. It's
good World Cup to look forward to, actually.
Yes, I think it is.
It's going to be such a good, you know, another good thing for women's cricket as well, I feel like, because it's going to be such a close tournament. I feel like it's going to be really, really amazing to watch.
Aussies, though. Go Aussies.
Do you know how much publicity and promotion there's been in New Zealand itself? Like, we haven't heard anything much back here.
No,
and I was just wondering,
good point.
I did see someone tweeted something about being at the New Zealand airport. I don't know which one it is, but the big airport in New Zealand, and there's a big like cricket ball, like a massive cricket ball, and it's like advertising the World Cup at the airport. So I think that's a good thing.
That's a really,
but that is all I've seen, just the big cricket ball.
Yeah, because if the T20 like World Cup here in 2020 was promoted so well for months beforehand, and let's get there and get the record crowd and all that, so the whole public was caught up in it. In England, the previous World Cup, as you say, where they won, they're everywhere there. There's stations, you know, railway stations in various big towns, huge glitzy boards up, you know, advertising it. And I thought they did really, really well and showed us how it should be done. So I was just hoping New Zealand, because you want some crowds there, and since a lot of the international travellers can't go there, it's going to rely on the Kiwis themselves.
Yeah, I think that's also, I know with the 2017 one being advertised in England, I know a lot of people who had never watched cricket before but went to that game, and never watched women's cricket before and went to that game and fell in love with it, you know. So that just proves that the advertising is such a key part of getting.
I think it is, absolutely.
Yeah, and I also think that's a big part of on the Women's World Cup. It wasn't, you couldn't watch it like unless you paid for KO and Foxtel. But Alyssa Healy, I know, was a big advocate for why is the men's free but the women's isn't, like it's not on free to air TV. So now they've released a freebie package or something like that, and made a specific channel on Foxtel so people can watch this World Cup.
That is fantastic. Yeah, sorry. They just went because that was a huge thing. They said they wouldn't, and I'm just like, what? You're talking all about this, getting the women's game up and running and everything, and then you go backwards a bit like that.
Yeah. And like our group in Melbourne, there was a group in Sydney who were going across too and going to be going around following them. Now, you think of all those people, so they do want to watch it. We're all keyed up for it, you know. Especially having the taste of England, that just here, there's a bit of momentum going now. The World Cup, that's the next thing. So I just hope maybe the television, even though they said you can go onto KO for free or something or other like that, a lot of people don't know much about that or how to manage it all and so on. And you sort of wish that somebody else had come to the party and show a bit more of it. Yeah. That's what I think. And I think Cricket Australia should have stitched it up somehow.
Yeah, because it was really only Alyssa Healy who was talking about it from what I saw, you know, and she was giving away like 20 KO vouchers or something just so people could watch this. But she was the only person that I saw on social media who was saying this needs to be free, you know, that she was the only person I saw. And I feel like it's so good that she did, because it's now got its freebie package. But why was no one else talking about it? Why was no one else talking about it?
I don't know. Maybe I better write some letters to the editor or something.
Yes.
And get something going.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you very much, and it's good to meet you too. Keep going with the good work.
We treat them that way, and we're very much out to prove who is top. And we beat them when they were here in 84-85, the last series out here.
Well, that was really insightful and really awesome to do, actually. That was very amazing to talk to her, and we're very appreciative of her time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a real shame, as people would have heard, that they can't get over to the World Cup this year. But like you heard as well, they'll get a little group together and reminisce about old times and support. And it's really great that they support the current women's game today as much as they do, which is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was our interview with Ann Mitchell. We really hope you enjoyed it. Now, next week we are joined with another guest. She is a Melbourne Renegades player, and she bowls off spin, and she's been, you know, around the WBBL scene for a couple of seasons now. So definitely got a bright future ahead of her. Yes. So we will chat to her next week, and yeah, that's another really exciting one, I think.
Yes.
So yeah, let us know who you think. That was our episode with Ann Mitchell. We really hope you enjoyed listening. Now, if you did, you can get in contact with us on Instagram or Twitter at howsthattcp, or you can send us an email at howsthatthecricketpodcast@gmail.com. But for this week, that is all from me.
That's all from me, guys.